The claim I'm responding to tonight is by Roche. It's abortion has a significant negative effect on people in USA. The opponent's secondary claims were 1, that the process of abortion may harm women, 2, abortions ending a life, and 3, abortion is basically murder. One point supporting my opponent's first secondary claim was that the process of abortion can harm women. He didn't have enough support to say it was physically harmful to the woman's body. He said that abortion leads to physical injuries because of possible medical complications or unclean or unsafe equipment. While I do not disagree that there have been cases of these, he doesn't mention that there are different possible abortion methods in which some are safer than others. He also does not make it clear about how often injuries or medical complications actually occur. Do they really happen that often? An article from abortionabout.com says that 1, deaths and complications from abortions are mostly preventable. 2, women have access to safe services where the likelihood of dying as a result of abortion is extremely rare. And 3, that legal abortions today are immensely safer than illegal abortions. Another point that he used to support that the process can harm women says abortions can lead to long-term grief and psychological problems. I assume this is correct, but I also believe that an unfit mother and her unwanted child can also eventually suffer from grief and psychological problems as well. My opponent states that there is an increased chance in having breast cancer after abortion. Well, in my researching, according to the National Cancer Institute, the risk is 1 out of every 252 women. How many of these women were already destined to have breast cancer? There's not enough data to support this claim yet, so that point might not be considered by someone who's considering having an abortion. His second and third secondary claims are basically the same. His second claim states that the abortion is ending a life, and his third says abortion is basically murder. He does not really differentiate in the two. In supporting his second claim, my opponent says the unborn fetus never had a chance to speak its thoughts. He also said that an unborn fetus could possibly have turned out to be the next Kobe or another famous or important person. But you can look at it both ways. The fetus can also have ended up a murderer on America's Most Wanted. But besides that, I felt like the point was a value claim and undermines the issue of the mother and direct issues of abortion. My opponent mentioned how abortion is a legal way to commit murder. He used a testimony who compared abortion to the Holocaust because millions of abortions take place per year. I really thought this was an extreme comparison. I think this opinion completely ignores significant factors that apply to having an abortion, and these two situations are completely different. In conclusion, I would like to say that my opponent did not provide enough information to say that abortions are completely unsafe. There are many different abortion methods, and women have access to safe services. Abortions will take place in the USA most likely forever, and legal abortions will always be safer than legal ones. Also, his second and third claims said the same thing, that abortion is ending a life and is basically murder. His points supporting those claims were very value-based and not very factual, in supporting his direct claim that abortions have a negative effect on the USA.
All right, structurally, everything's easy to follow. On the first point, the relative safety, I think you've got some good information here, but it's very general, and if you had some stronger statistical comparisons, I think that it'd be more convincing. For instance, the first thing that occurred to me is, what's the rate of fatalities for abortion versus live birth? That would be one reasonable way of making the comparison and talk about how safe the two things are. On the next point, you basically try to put the argument into some kind of context, and that's okay. I understand on that point, but I do see that the different techniques, for instance, that could be used, why they might matter, but you don't really develop that issue much. On the breast cancer argument, you give a reason, but the numbers that you give, they're not particularly convincing, and again, it seems to me like I don't remember what the advocates' evidence on this point was. You don't really contrast your argument, your evidence to the advocate's point. So in listening to your evidence, which doesn't initially seem convincing to me, I don't have any way to contrast it to what's going on there. I thought that you did an appropriate thing in grouping the second and third points together. I think they are basically the same argument. There is a value claim there when you talk about, oh, well, it could be the next Kobe, and you got a perfectly legitimate argument here. Yeah, well, it could be the next, Charlie Manson too. I mean, whenever you're dealing with hypotheticals, if somebody's going to depend on a hypothetical, it's not hard to come up with a counter hypothetical. So that's a reasonable challenge on that point. The last argument on when you're making a comparison on genocides and you're saying that this comparison is a little extreme and it's not reasonable, I think you need to explain a little more why it's not a reasonable comparison to make. The advocate's talking about the millions of children that they believe have been wiped out, that it is the equivalent of a genocide, that we've got large numbers of people, and you need to explain why it doesn't fit into that category, either because of the circumstances, because of the decision maker, because of the process that's involved, or because of the complexity of rights that are involved. And I think that would make your argument stronger there. All right, thank you.